No stores, no money, no choices. Out there on the frontier, families faced a brutal reality: eat what you can find or starve. The wilderness was unforgiving. If a family wanted to survive, they needed meals that could be made from almost nothing. Meals that would keep them alive when everything else failed. They needed food that could last through harsh winters without spoiling. They needed recipes that could stretch a few ingredients into weeks of nutrition. Every meal mattered. One bad ingredient, one spoiled batch, one failed harvest, and an entire family could face starvation in the middle of nowhere. The families who lasted knew the secrets. They knew what to eat. But what were these cheap, life-saving meals that kept pioneer families alive when money was scarce and food was scarcer? How did they turn basic ingredients into nutritious meals that could sustain hard-working families through the harshest conditions? What were the cooking techniques that meant the difference between survival and starvation on the American frontier? Today, we're exploring the 10 essential meals that formed the backbone of frontier survival: cheap, nutritious, and designed to keep families alive when everything else failed. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Between 1800 and 1890, over 6 million families moved west to claim frontier land. Most arrived with less than $200 in cash and faced months or years before their first successful harvest. These families had to survive on meals that cost pennies to make, but provided the calories and nutrition needed for the grueling work of building a homestead. The difference between knowing these recipes and not knowing them was often the difference between life and death. Number 1. Hardtack. Hardtack was the ultimate survival food, a simple combination of flour, water, and salt that could last for years without spoiling. This wasn't bread as we know it today. This was edible armor designed to keep families alive when everything else failed. The recipe was deceptively simple: 3 cups of flour, 1 cup of water, and 1 teaspoon of salt, mixed into a stiff dough, rolled flat, and cut into squares about 3 inches across. The key was in the baking, slow and thorough until every trace of moisture was eliminated. Properly made hardtack was rock hard and could literally be used as a hammer. The durability was legendary. Hardtack from the Civil War was still edible decades later. Families stored it in wooden barrels or metal containers, and it remained nutritious for years. This wasn't just convenience. It was survival insurance for families who might face months without fresh supplies. Preparation required strategy. Hardtack was too hard to eat directly and could break teeth if attempted. Families soaked it in coffee, milk, or water to soften it. They crumbled it into soups and stews to add bulk and calories. Some families fried, softened hardtack in bacon grease, creating a filling meal that provided essential fats and carbohydrates. Hardtack and coffee, that's what built America. Simple food for people doing impossible work, wrote frontier surveyor John Wesley Powell in 1869. The economic advantage was enormous. A barrel of hardtack cost less than $5 and could feed a family for months. For families operating on budgets of pennies per day, this represented the difference between survival and starvation. Number 2. Salt pork and beans. Salt pork and beans formed the protein-carbohydrate combination that sustained millions of frontier families through their first harsh years. This wasn't gourmet cooking. It was calculated nutrition designed to provide maximum calories and essential nutrients at minimum cost. Salt pork was preserved pork belly or shoulder that had been cured in salt for months. The salt drew out moisture and created an environment hostile to bacteria, allowing the meat to remain edible for years without refrigeration. A single barrel could provide protein for a family through an entire winter. The preparation process required understanding of both preservation and cooking techniques. Salt pork had to be soaked in water to remove excess salt before cooking. The soaking water was often saved and used as the base for cooking beans, adding flavor and nutrients that would otherwise be lost. Beans provided the carbohydrate foundation and essential amino acids that complemented the protein in salt pork. Dried beans could be stored indefinitely and provided fiber, B vitamins, and minerals that prevented nutritional deficiency diseases. The combination created a complete protein profile equivalent to fresh meat. The cooking technique was critical for both safety and nutrition. Beans had to be soaked overnight, then boiled for hours to break down toxins and make them digestible. Salt pork was added during cooking, its fat rendering out to provide calories and flavor while the meat became tender. Families developed variations to prevent monotony. Wild onions, herbs, and vegetables were added when available. Some families added molasses or maple syrup to create a sweet and savory combination. Others used different types of beans depending on availability. The economic efficiency was unmatched. A pot of salt pork and beans could feed a family of 6 for less than 50 cents and provided enough calories and protein for a full day of hard labor. Number 3. Cornmeal Mush. Cornmeal mush was the versatile foundation of frontier nutrition, a simple preparation of ground corn that could be adapted into dozens of different meals depending on available ingredients and cooking methods. This wasn't just food, it was the building block that kept families fed when nothing else was available. The basic preparation required only cornmeal, water, and salt. Coarse cornmeal was slowly stirred into boiling salted water, creating a thick porridge that could be eaten hot or allowed to cool and solidify. The ratio was critical. Too much water created thin gruel with little nutritional value, too little created indigestible paste. The versatility made cornmeal mush invaluable for frontier families. Hot mush could be eaten as porridge with milk, honey, or molasses when available. Cooled mush could be sliced and fried in bacon grease, creating filling cakes that provided sustained energy. Leftover mush could be crumbled into soups to add bulk and calories. Nutritional value varied depending on the type of corn used. Whole kernel corn that was ground at home retained more vitamins and minerals than processed cornmeal. Yellow cornmeal provided vitamin A, while white cornmeal was often preferred for its milder flavor. Storage techniques determined success. Cornmeal had to be kept dry and protected from insects and rodents. Families stored it in wooden barrels or metal containers with tight-fitting lids. Properly stored cornmeal could last for months without spoiling. Regional variations reflected available ingredients and cultural preferences. Southern families often added bacon grease for flavor and fat. Northern families might add maple syrup or honey. Western families learned to incorporate wild berries when available. The economic advantage was substantial. A bag of cornmeal cost less than $2 and could provide the foundation for hundreds of meals. For families operating on subsistence budgets, cornmeal mush represented reliable nutrition that could stretch other ingredients. If you want to learn more about how frontier families maximize their food resources, check out our episode on 7 Forgotten Survival Strategies from America's Harshest Lands. Number 4. Wild Game Stew. Wild game stew transformed whatever meat families could hunt or trap into nutritious meals that maximized every calorie and nutrient. This wasn't sport hunting. This was survival cooking that turned rabbits, squirrels, birds, and even less desirable animals into life-sustaining food. The foundation was making the most of every part of the animal. Nothing was wasted. Meat, organs, bones, and skin were used to extract maximum nutrition. Bones were cracked to release marrow. Organs were added for vitamins and minerals, and tough cuts were slow cooked until tender. Preparation techniques varied depending on the game available. Small game like rabbits and squirrels were often cooked whole after cleaning. Larger game was butchered into chunks that would cook evenly. The key was long, slow cooking that broke down tough fibers and extracted nutrients from bones and connective tissue. Vegetables and seasonings were added based on availability and season. Wild onions, garlic, and herbs provided flavor and nutrients. Root vegetables like wild carrots or Jerusalem artichokes added carbohydrates. In winter, families relied on stored vegetables like potatoes, turnips, and cabbage. The cooking process required careful management of heat and timing. Game stew was typically cooked in large cast-iron pots over open fires, requiring constant attention to prevent burning while ensuring thorough cooking. The stew was often kept simmering for hours. Preservation techniques extended the value beyond a single meal. Leftover stew could be allowed to cool and solidify, then reheated as needed. In cold weather, stew could be kept outside and portions reheated throughout the week. The nutritional value was exceptional when properly prepared. Wild game provided complete proteins and essential amino acids. Organs added vitamins A, B, and iron. Bones contributed calcium and phosphorus. The combination created a nutritionally complete meal. A pot of game stew could feed a family for days and provide strength for the hardest work. Waste nothing, use everything, noted frontier cookbook author Lydia Maria Child in 1844. Number 5. Johnnycakes. Johnnycakes were portable, durable cornmeal cakes that could be cooked on any flat surface and carried for days without spoiling. These weren't delicate pastries, they were survival food designed to provide quick energy for families constantly on the move or working far from home. The basic recipe required only cornmeal, water, and salt, but the technique determined success or failure. The cornmeal had to be the right consistency, fine enough to hold together but coarse enough to provide texture. The water had to be the right temperature, hot enough to partially cook the cornmeal but not create lumps. Cooking methods adapted to available equipment and conditions. Traditional Johnnycakes were cooked on a flat stone heated over coals, but families used whatever flat surface was available: iron griddles, the flat side of a hoe, or clean wooden planks. The key was even heat that cooked the cakes through without burning. The texture and flavor could be modified with available ingredients. Some families added a small amount of fat, bacon grease, lard, or butter to create richer, more tender cakes. Others added honey, molasses, or maple syrup for sweetness. Wild berries or nuts could be incorporated when available. Portability made Johnnycakes invaluable for frontier families. The cakes could be wrapped in cloth and carried in pockets or packs, providing quick energy during long workdays. They didn't crumble easily and could withstand rough handling that would destroy other types of bread. Storage techniques ensured Johnnycakes remained edible for extended periods. Properly cooked cakes were completely dry and could be stored in containers for weeks without spoiling. They could be eaten dry or softened with water, milk, or coffee. Regional variations reflected local preferences and available ingredients. New England Johnnycakes were typically thin and crispy. Southern versions were often thicker and softer. Western families adapted the recipe to use whatever type of cornmeal was available. The economic efficiency was remarkable. A batch of Johnnycakes could be made for pennies and provided portable nutrition for days. For families who needed to work away from home or travel long distances, Johnnycakes represented reliable food that required no additional preparation. Number 6. Dried fruit compote. Dried fruit compote transformed preserved fruits into vitamin-rich meals that prevented scurvy and other nutritional deficiency diseases during long winters when fresh produce was impossible to obtain. The drying process concentrated nutrients while removing moisture that would allow spoilage. Apples, pears, and berries were sliced thin and dried until completely dehydrated. Properly dried fruit could last for years and retained most of its vitamin content. Preparation required understanding the balance between nutrition and palatability. Dried fruit was soaked in water to rehydrate, then simmered slowly to create a thick, sweet mixture. Honey or maple syrup enhanced flavor when available. The vitamin content made dried fruit compote crucial for frontier health. Dried apples retained vitamin C that prevented scurvy. Berries provided antioxidants and additional vitamins. The natural sugars provided quick energy for demanding physical work. The economic value was significant. Dried fruit could be prepared during harvest season when fruit was abundant, then used throughout the year to provide nutrition and variety. A barrel of dried fruit could provide vitamin-rich meals for months. Number 7. Wild green soup. Wild green soup turned foraged plants into nutritious meals that provided essential vitamins and minerals unavailable in preserved foods. This required extensive knowledge of plant identification and preparation techniques. Plant identification was the critical first skill. Families had to learn to recognize edible plants like dandelion greens, wild spinach, and lamb's quarters while avoiding toxic lookalikes. This knowledge was often passed down through generations or learned from Native American tribes. Preparation techniques varied depending on the greens collected. Some plants could be eaten raw, while others required cooking to remove bitterness or neutralize mild toxins. Boiling was the most common method, often with multiple changes of water. Nutritional value made wild greens soup essential for frontier health. Wild greens provided vitamins A, C, and K that were often lacking in preserved foods. They also provided iron, calcium, and other minerals essential for health. The forest provides medicine and food for those who know where to look. Every green thing has its purpose, wrote frontier herbalist Samuel Thompson in 1825. If you want to learn more about identifying and using wild plants for survival, check out our episode on 28 forgotten survival tricks that could save your life in the wild. Number 8. Fish head soup. Fish head soup maximized the nutritional value of every fish caught by using parts that modern cooks discard. This wasn't waste management. It was sophisticated nutrition that extracted calcium, healthy fats, and complete proteins from the most nutrient-dense parts of the fish. The preparation process required understanding fish anatomy and cooking techniques. Fish heads were cleaned but not skinned, as the skin contained valuable collagen and fats. Eyes and organs were often included for their high vitamin and mineral content. Cooking techniques focused on extracting nutrients from bones and cartilage. Fish heads were simmered for hours in water with salt and available vegetables. The long cooking process broke down bones, releasing calcium and other minerals into the broth. The nutritional value was exceptional. Fish heads contained high concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids, particularly in the brain and eye tissues. The bones provided calcium and phosphorus. The cartilage contributed collagen that supported joint health. The economic efficiency was remarkable. Using the entire fish, including heads that would otherwise be discarded, doubled the nutritional value of each fish caught. For families operating on subsistence budgets, this represented significant additional nutrition at no extra cost. For more information about traditional fishing techniques, see our episode on 7 wild river fish that kept frontiersmen alive. Number 9. Pemmican. Pemmican was the ultimate portable survival food, a concentrated mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries that could provide complete nutrition for weeks without spoiling. This wasn't just preserved meat, it was engineered nutrition designed to sustain people through the harshest conditions. The meat preparation process required precise techniques. Lean meat was cut into thin strips and dried over low fires until completely dehydrated. The meat had to be dried thoroughly to prevent spoilage, but not overcooked to the point where it lost nutritional value. Fat preparation was equally critical. Animal fat was rendered slowly to remove all moisture while preserving nutritional value. The fat had to be pure and clean, as any contamination would cause the pemmican to spoil. The mixing process required understanding proper ratios. Traditional pemmican was approximately 50% dried meat, 35% fat, and 15% dried berries. The dried meat was pounded into powder, then mixed with melted fat and dried berries. The nutritional density was unmatched. Pemmican provided complete proteins, essential fats, vitamins, and minerals in a compact form that could sustain hard-working adults for extended periods. A pound of pemmican provided the caloric equivalent of several pounds of fresh food. Pemmican is the perfect food. It contains everything a man needs to survive, and nothing he doesn't. Light to carry, impossible to spoil, wrote fur trader Alexander Henry in 1809. Number 10. Acorn flour bread. Acorn flour bread transformed one of nature's most abundant nuts into nutritious bread that could sustain families when grain was unavailable or too expensive. This required sophisticated processing techniques that removed bitter tannins while preserving nutritional value. The collection process required understanding acorn varieties and timing. White oak acorns were preferred for their lower tannin content and milder flavor. Acorns had to be collected fresh and processed quickly to prevent spoilage. Processing techniques removed tannins that made raw acorns inedible. Acorns were shelled and ground into coarse meal, then leached with water to remove bitter tannins. The leaching process involved repeatedly rinsing the ground acorns until the water ran clear. Bread preparation required adapting traditional techniques to work with acorn flour. Acorn flour lacked the gluten found in wheat flour, so it couldn't be used alone to make risen bread. It was often mixed with small amounts of wheat flour or used to make flat breads. The economic advantage was substantial. Acorns were free and abundant in oak forests throughout North America. A family could collect and process enough acorns in a few weeks to provide flour for months. For families who couldn't afford grain, acorn flour represented free nutrition. These 10 meals weren't just recipes, they were the foundation of American expansion. Each one represented generations of knowledge about turning basic ingredients into life-sustaining nutrition. The families who survived understood that survival wasn't about having expensive food, it was about knowing how to make the most of whatever was available. Today's world may have changed, but the principles remain the same. Resourcefulness, knowledge, and the ability to find nutrition in unexpected places. These are the foundations of survival in any era. You'll find dozens of episodes exploring these traditional survival skills and frontier wisdom right here on Wild America.